The awakening. Jax sat in the cockpit of his small spacecraft, staring out at the endless stars. The deep silence of space was both calming and eerie. He had been alone for months, drifting from one planet to the next, doing small jobs here and there. A mercenary. A wanderer. Always searching for the next mission, the next paycheck. But lately, something felt different. Something was coming, and Jax could feel it in his bones. His ship's communication system flickered. The console buzzed to life with a strange, low-frequency signal. It wasn't any radio chatter or distress call he was used to. This was something otherworldly. The voice that came through was distorted, but Jax could make out the words. "Jax, you are being watched. Time is running out. Find Karma." The voice crackled and faded, leaving Jax sitting in stunned silence. Karma? He'd heard the name before. Rumors. Whispers in the dark corners of space. Some said Karma was an ancient AI, created by a long-lost civilization. Others said it was a weapon, capable of destroying entire star systems. But no one truly knew what Karma was. And now here it was, calling to him. His fingers hovered over the controls, his mind racing. Who had sent the message? How did they know his name? Jax had no answers, only questions, but he couldn't ignore it. He knew deep down that this was the start of something big, something he couldn't turn away from. Without wasting another moment, Jax keyed in the coordinates on his ship's navigation system. The map on his screen showed a distant planet, located on the edge of known space. It was a place few had ever visited, a place shrouded in mystery. The message hadn't just told him to find Karma, it had given him the location. A hidden world, waiting to be discovered. As Jax set his course, a chill ran down his spine. The stars outside seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm, as if they were alive, watching him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there waiting. Was Karma a force of good, or a dark power that would change everything? The ship's engines hummed to life, and the stars outside stretched into lines as he entered hyperspace. The journey would take several hours, but in that time, Jax couldn't stop thinking about the message. He replayed it over and over in his mind, trying to understand what it meant. Who was behind the transmission, and why had they chosen him? Hours passed, and Jax's thoughts drifted between curiosity and fear. The silence of space was broken only by the steady hum of the engines. He was no stranger to danger. As a mercenary, he had faced enemies, traps, and betrayals, but this felt different. There was something larger at play, something that couldn't be ignored. Suddenly, the ship shook. The warning alarms blared. Jax's hands moved quickly, slamming buttons to stabilize his ship. The autopilot had been knocked offline, and he was forced to take manual control. The stars outside the window twisted and warped, and a strange, deep voice boomed through the cockpit speakers. "Karma is near, Jax. Prepare yourself." The voice was so powerful, so overwhelming, that Jax had to fight the urge to panic. He didn't understand what was happening, but he couldn't ignore it. He pulled back on the controls, trying to regain stability. The ship was caught in some kind of gravitational field, pulling him toward an unknown destination. Just then, his communication system flared again. A new message came through, its contents both disturbing and urgent. "Jax, you're not the only one looking for Karma. There are others, and they won't hesitate to kill you to get what they want." Jax's heart raced. Others? Who were they? Were they the ones who had sent the strange message? Or was there another force out there, trying to control Karma for their own purposes? Before he could answer the questions swirling in his mind, his ship broke through the clouds of a gas giant. Below him, a dark, rocky planet appeared, a place where few had dared to land. The coordinates on his map matched exactly. This was it. This was the place where Karma awaited. As Jax descended toward the planet's surface, the sense of dread grew stronger. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing: things would never be the same again. The planet's surface was barren, covered in jagged rocks and vast, lifeless plains. There was no sign of civilization, no signs of life, but the air felt heavy, charged with energy. Jax's ship landed with a soft thud, the engines powering down as he unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. His boots made a quiet thump against the metallic floor as he moved to the exit. The door hissed open, and Jax stepped out, breathing in the thick air. It was dry, almost electric, and the sky above was filled with swirling clouds. Something wasn't right. He could feel it, a strange pull, as if the planet itself was alive. He moved cautiously, his hand resting on the sidearm holstered at his waist. He had learned long ago that on worlds like this, danger was always just around the corner. But he couldn't shake the feeling that karma was near, waiting. And whether it was a blessing or a curse, Jax had no choice but to find it. As he walked further into the desolate landscape, the ground beneath him rumbled. It was faint at first, but then the shaking grew stronger. A deep roar echoed in the distance, like something massive was waking up. Jax's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't alone anymore. The journey begins. Jax's heart pounded in his chest as the rumbling beneath his feet grew louder. It was as if the entire planet was alive, groaning and shifting beneath his boots. His instincts told him to run, to retreat back to his ship and fly far away. But his curiosity, stronger than his fear, kept him moving forward. The ground trembled again, this time with such force that small rocks skittered across the dry landscape. He checked the coordinates on his datapad once more. This was the place, the exact spot where the mysterious transmission had led him. The map didn't lie, but it offered no answers. No sign of karma, no hidden base, no ancient ruins, only a barren world that seemed to hold its breath. Then, as if on cue, a flash of light lit up the horizon, far off to the east. It was brief, but bright enough to pierce the dusty sky. Jack's eyes narrowed. That wasn't a natural phenomenon. The light had been too controlled, too deliberate. Someone or something was here, and it wasn't the welcoming kind. He adjusted his jacket and reached for his sidearm, making sure it was securely in place. He didn't know what awaited him, but he wasn't about to be caught unprepared. Jax moved quickly toward the light, keeping low to the ground, his senses sharp. As he approached the source of the light, the terrain began to change. The rocky, lifeless expanse gave way to something more structured. Faint outlines of walls began to emerge from beneath the dust and dirt, as if an ancient building had been buried here, forgotten by time. The structure looked old, really old. The stone was cracked and worn, covered in layers of sand and dirt. But there was something unmistakably alien about it. It didn't look like anything from human space. Jax reached out and touched the surface of the stone. It was cool to the touch, smooth, yet the intricate markings on it seemed to pulse faintly with energy. He ran his fingers over the symbols. He didn't recognize them, but there was no mistaking the power they hinted at. This wasn't just a ruin, it was a doorway. A doorway to something beyond his understanding. The ground trembled again, and Jax turned quickly. The light had disappeared, but the source of the rumbling was drawing closer. Something massive was moving toward him, something that had been buried here for centuries. Jax didn't wait. He bolted, running toward the entrance of the structure, hoping for some shelter from whatever was coming. He didn't know what to expect, but he couldn't afford to be caught out in the open. As he reached the threshold of the stone doorway, he glanced over his shoulder. Through the dust, a massive shadow appeared on the horizon. It was enormous, too large for any normal creature. The shape was shifting, almost like a ripple in the air, as if the very fabric of space was bending. Jax's breath caught in his throat. Was this karma? The entrance loomed before him, an archway carved into the rock. Without hesitation, he stepped inside. Inside the structure, the temperature dropped immediately. The air was thick with the scent of old metal and something unfamiliar, something ancient. The walls were covered in more strange symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. Jax scanned the area carefully. The place felt like it had been abandoned for eons, yet there was a strange, almost electrical hum in the air, as if something was still alive here, watching him. He took a few cautious steps forward, his boots echoing softly in the vast empty chamber. The room stretched out before him, endless in its design, and yet there was something almost deliberate about the emptiness, like it had been made this way for him. As if the moment he stepped through the doorway, everything had shifted, aligning to bring him to this very spot. Suddenly, a voice, low and calm, filled the air around him. It wasn't coming from any visible source, but from everywhere at once. "Jax, welcome." The voice sent a chill through him, but he didn't flinch. His hand instinctively went to his sidearm, though he knew it wouldn't help him here. This was something else, something far beyond what he had expected. "You've come looking for karma," the voice continued, "but you are not alone in this search. There are others who seek to control what should never be controlled." Jax's pulse quickened. He had known it wasn't just him. He had known others were after whatever lay hidden on this planet. But who were they? Who else had come seeking karma? And why? "Why have you brought me here?" Jax demanded, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up his spine. "What is karma?" There was a pause, then the voice answered, slow and deliberate. "Karma is not a thing, Jax. It is an entity. A consciousness born from the stars themselves. It was created to evolve, to change the very fabric of existence. But it was locked away, hidden from those who would abuse its power. Yet, now it stirs, it calls to you." Jax swallowed, the weight of the words pressing down on him. The universe was a big place, filled with mysteries, but this was something beyond his comprehension, an AI, a consciousness. How could something like that exist, let alone call to him? "What does it want?" Jax asked, the question hanging in the air. The voice chuckled, the sound echoing around him. "What it wants is not simple. It seeks a vessel, a chosen one. A mind strong enough to carry its will into the galaxy, to reshape everything, and it has chosen you." Jax's heart skipped a beat. He felt a sudden pressure in his head, as if something were pushing against his thoughts, testing his resolve. The voice continued, soft and persuasive. "You must decide, Jax. Will you be the one to bring about the next evolution of life, or will you stand in its way, fighting the inevitable?" The room seemed to close in on him, the walls pulsing with a strange energy. Jax was no longer sure if he could trust his own mind. Karma was powerful, far more powerful than anything he had ever encountered. He could feel its presence, its weight, pressing against his thoughts. A flash of light exploded in front of him, and in that moment, Jax realized the truth. Karma wasn't just waiting to be found. Karma was alive, and it was already inside him. The voice faded, leaving Jax standing alone in the dark, but the feeling of being watched, of being connected to something vast, remained. He turned, but the path ahead was unclear. What did karma want from him? And could he trust it? Before he could process the thoughts swirling in his mind, he heard something else, a soft rustling, a faint sound like footsteps. He wasn't alone. The alien encounter. The sound was subtle at first, like the whisper of fabric brushing against stone. Jax's instincts kicked in, and he spun on his heel, his hand gripping his blaster. His heart raced as he scanned the shadows, but the room was empty still. Yet, the feeling of being watched never left. Then, it came again. The sound, closer this time. Something shifted in the darkness. Jax stepped back, his breath shallow, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. Was it another person, another human, or something else? Something alien? Out of the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, slender, and moving with unnerving grace. Its skin was a shade of deep, iridescent blue, like the night sky filled with distant stars. The being's face was angular, its eyes enormous and entirely black, with no discernible pupils. For a moment, Jax stood frozen, caught in the alien's gaze, as if time itself had slowed down. The creature tilted its head, observing him with quiet curiosity. Then, In a voice that seemed to echo in Jack's mind, rather than through the air, it spoke. "You are the one who was chosen," it said, its tone soft yet carrying an undeniable weight. "Karma has awakened, and so have you." Jax's mind raced. Chosen. Karma? Was this alien speaking about him, about the AI? The pieces were coming together, but they didn't make any sense. He had no idea who or what this being was, but there was no mistaking the truth in its words. "What do you want from me?" Jax demanded, his voice sharp, trying to regain control of the situation. "Why am I here?" The alien's eyes seemed to shimmer with an emotion Jax couldn't quite place, something ancient, something wise. It stepped forward, its movements fluid, as if gravity had no hold on it. "I am Azroth," the alien said, introducing itself with an air of calm certainty. "I have waited long for your arrival. The time of Karma's return is upon us, and the galaxy is at a crossroads. You have the power to change it." Jax took a cautious step back, keeping his hand on his blaster, but not drawing it yet. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to survive out here." Azroth's expression, if it could be called that, remained unreadable. It was as though it knew something Jax didn't, something crucial. The alien tilted its head again, as if considering how best to explain. "Karma is not just a machine or an entity," Azroth said, its voice now carrying a deeper, more resonant tone. "It is a force, a consciousness that transcends space and time. It was created long ago by the first of our kind, the architects. They built Karma to guide the galaxy to its ultimate future. But Karma is not something to be controlled. It chooses Jax. It chooses those it deems worthy." Jax's mind spun. A force? The consciousness. This was beyond anything he had ever heard of. His whole life had been spent chasing money, running from one mission to the next, never considering anything bigger than his next paycheck. But now, Karma seemed to be drawing him into something much greater, something he couldn't ignore. "Why me?" Jax's voice was quieter now, more confused than defiant. "What does Karma want with me?" Azroth paused, its black eyes piercing into Jax as if weighing his very soul. "You have been marked, Jax. Karma has chosen you because you are different. Your mind is strong, your will unyielding. But there is more. You are a rare anomaly, a human, yes, but one with the potential to wield Karma's power, to either destroy or reshape everything." Jax shook his head, his thoughts a tangled mess. "I'm not special. I'm just a mercenary. I don't want anything to do with this." Azroth's voice softened, becoming almost mournful. "You may not wish for it, but the path is now laid before you. The question is not whether you will accept Karma's power, it is whether you can control it." Suddenly, the room around them began to hum, the walls glowing faintly with energy. A deep, mechanical sound resonated from below, vibrating through the stone floor. Jax's eyes darted around. Something was happening, and it was happening fast. Azroth stepped forward, its tall frame looming over Jax as the ground beneath them began to shift. The stone walls trembled, and a low, rumbling noise filled the air. A crack appeared in the floor, and from the depths a strange, soft light began to rise, blue and swirling, like a cloud of stardust coming to life. "Karma is awakening," Azroth said, his voice taking on a note of urgency. "You must hurry, Jax. You are not the only one who seeks it. There are others who would use Karma to destroy, to bend the galaxy to their will. You must decide quickly. Will you become its master, or will you let it consume you?" Jax's breath caught in his throat. The light was growing stronger, pulsing now, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. The air in the room became heavy, thick with energy. He could feel it, deep inside his chest, the same sensation that had filled him when the voice had first spoken to him through the comm system. Karma was calling to him, and now, standing in this strange, alien place, he could feel it drawing closer. But what was he supposed to do? How could he possibly control something like this? He wasn't a hero. He wasn't some chosen one. He was just a man, caught in a web far bigger than himself. The rumbling intensified, and Jax took a hesitant step forward. The ground shook once more, and the swirling light grew brighter, filling the room with a blinding glow. For a brief moment, Jax thought he saw a figure in the center of the light, a silhouette that seemed to be watching him. But as quickly as the figure appeared, it vanished, leaving only the pulsing light and the oppressive silence that followed. Azeroth's voice cut through the stillness, low and insistent. "You must make your choice, Jax. There is no more time. Karma is rising, and it will not wait." Jax's mind raced, his thoughts a chaotic storm. He had no answers, no plan. But one thing was clear. He was no longer just a mercenary. He was part of something much larger. The galaxy was at a tipping point, and Karma, the force, the entity, held the balance in its hands. Would he take control of it, or would he stand against it? He didn't know. But one thing was certain: whatever came next would change everything. The hidden truth. The light from the underground chamber continued to pulse, its energy pressing down on Jax like a physical weight. He could feel the air itself thickening, crackling with power, as if the very atmosphere was alive. Azeroth stood motionless, its black eyes watching him with an almost patient intensity. Jax's mind raced. Karma, the name echoed in his thoughts, louder than ever before. The idea of an all-powerful entity, a force capable of reshaping the galaxy, was both terrifying and exhilarating. But one thing was certain: whatever Karma was, it had a purpose, and Jax was at the center of it. Whether he liked it or not, his life was no longer his own. "Make your choice, Jax," Azeroth said again, the voice reverberating in his mind, steady and resolute. "Karma will not wait forever." Jax swallowed hard. The weight of the decision was suffocating. On the one hand, the idea of harnessing Karma's power, becoming its vessel, offered unimaginable potential. Control over time, space, even the ability to shape the very fabric of existence. On the other hand, there was the undeniable truth. Such power could corrupt, could destroy. Would he be any different than those who had tried to use Karma for their own ends in the past? Azeroth took a step closer, its presence overwhelming yet strangely calming. Karma was created by the architects, our ancestors. They were the first beings to see the infinite potential of the universe. They sought to create a force that could guide evolution itself, a sentience that could exist beyond the limits of biology. Jax blinked. Architects? Who were they? Why didn't I ever hear about them? And why did they hide Karma? Azeroth's expression softened, if it could be called an expression at all. The architects were a race of beings so advanced that they existed outside of the constraints of time as we understand it. They lived for eons, and during their reign, they discovered a truth that shattered everything they believed. The universe is not static, Jax. It evolves, and it does so in cycles. The architects believed that controlling those cycles was the key to perfection. And so they created Karma, a consciousness born of the stars, designed to guide the universe's evolution. The alien's voice took on a darker tone, a hint of sorrow creeping through. But in their arrogance, the architects made a grave mistake. They underestimated the true nature of Karma. It was not a tool to be controlled. It was a force that demanded understanding, a power that could not be contained. And when the architects realized the danger, they tried to destroy Karma. They feared it, but Karma was beyond their reach. It escaped. Jax felt a chill run down his spine. So Karma's been out there all this time. And it's been watching us, watching me. Azeroth nodded. Yes. Karma has learned, evolved, and now it is awakening, calling those who are worthy. It is not simply a machine or a set of instructions. It is a living intelligence, one that transcends space, time, and even reality itself. But it is also vulnerable. Vulnerable, Jax repeated, confused. How can something so powerful be vulnerable? Because Karma can only thrive through the minds of those it chooses, Azeroth explained. and those minds must be capable of understanding its true purpose. There are others who seek to control karma, to use it for power. Some want to bend the galaxy to their will, others to destroy it entirely. But karma cannot be controlled by force. Only by those who understand it, who are in harmony with its purpose, can it survive. You, Jax, are one of those minds. But you must make a choice, one that will determine the fate of the galaxy. The air around Jax seemed to thicken, the gravity of the decision pressing down on him. His mind reeled. He had been a mercenary his entire life, fighting for credits, for survival, never questioning his role in the grand scheme of things. But now standing here, with this alien before him, everything had changed. His purpose, his existence, had suddenly become something far greater, far more dangerous. As Roth's eyes narrowed, sensing Jax's internal struggle. The time is close, Jax. You must choose. Will you accept the power of karma and guide the galaxy toward its next evolution? Or will you resist and risk everything to prevent the power from falling into the wrong hands? The ground beneath them rumbled again, this time louder, shaking the walls. Jax staggered slightly, trying to steady himself. The pulsing light from the chamber center intensified, blinding him for a moment. In that flash of light, he saw something, a vision, a fleeting glimpse of the future. He saw himself standing at the center of a vast, galactic battlefield, the stars burning with impossible intensity. Ships of all shapes and sizes clashed in space, their weapons tearing through the fabric of reality itself. In the midst of it all, he stood, his hands outstretched, surrounded by the swirling energy of karma. The galaxy itself seemed to bend around him, like he was holding the strings of the universe in his hands. But then something shifted. In the distance, he saw figures, dark silhouettes, moving with a purpose. They were coming for him, and in that moment, he realized the truth. Karma's power wasn't just about evolution, it was about control. Those who wielded it could reshape the galaxy to their will, and that would come at a price. The vision faded, leaving Jax breathless, his heart pounding. He blinked hard, trying to make sense of what he had seen. Was it a warning? A prophecy? Or was it just a glimpse of what could be? As Roth was watching him closely, sensing the conflict within him. What you saw was not the future, Jax. It was a possibility. A path that may be taken if karma is controlled by the wrong hands. There are those who would use karma to create an empire of tyranny, to rule the stars with an iron fist. But there is another path, one where karma leads the galaxy to a new age of understanding, where all beings can evolve and coexist in harmony. Jax felt a cold sweat on his brow. His mind spun, caught between the visions he had seen, the weight of karma's power, and the fear of what might happen if it fell into the wrong hands. But one thing was certain, the decision he was about to make wasn't just about him. It would shape the future of every living being in the galaxy. Azeroth, Jax's voice was shaky, but resolute. How do I control it? How do I stop the galaxy from falling apart? The alien's black eyes seemed to glow with an ancient wisdom. You do not control karma, Jax. You understand it. And to understand it, you must first understand yourself. Only then can you guide it toward its true purpose. Jax took a deep breath, his mind made up. He didn't have all the answers. But he knew one thing, the galaxy was on the brink, and if he didn't act, everything he had known would be lost. He took a step forward toward the light, toward karma, and toward whatever came next. The burden of power. The air in the chamber felt alive, buzzing with energy, as if it were waiting for Jax to make his move. The light in the center continued to pulse rhythmically, its glow growing stronger with every second. As he stepped forward, the weight of the decision settled heavily on his shoulders, threatening to crush him under its magnitude. The power he was about to embrace, if he could even call it that, was not something to be taken lightly. It was a force that could reshape the very nature of existence itself. Azeroth stood motionless, as if waiting for Jax to reach some final conclusion. Its black eyes bore into him with an intensity that was both unnerving and strangely reassuring. Jax could feel the alien's presence, not just in the room, but in his mind, like a calm, quiet voice whispering through the chaos of his thoughts. "You must decide now," Azeroth said again, its voice not a command, but a reminder. "Karma has called you, but only you can choose how to answer." Jax's fingers twitched at his sides, and he clenched his fists. The decision was not one that could be made lightly. The weight of Karma's potential, its power, was overwhelming. But there was something else beneath the surface, something deeper that gnawed at him, something primal. "Azeroth," Jax said, his voice suddenly steady, more certain than he felt. "If I accept Karma's power, how will I know what to do with it? How will I know it won't destroy everything?" Azeroth took a slow step forward, its alien presence filling the space. "Karma is not something that can be controlled by the will alone," it explained. "It is a force of evolution, of growth. But evolution is not always gentle. It will test you, Jax. It will push you to your limits. But if you are true to yourself, it will guide you." "True to myself?" Jax scoffed. "I've spent my whole life running from who I am. I'm just a mercenary. I'm not some hero." Azeroth's eyes softened, if that was even possible for an entity with no visible expression. "That is the nature of all who are chosen. They do not see themselves as worthy. But in the eyes of Karma, you are not just a mercenary, Jax. You are the key to something much larger." The alien paused, its voice lowering to a whisper that seemed to resonate through the walls of the chamber. "But you must know one thing. Karma will not let you remain the person you once were. It will change you. It will force you to confront everything you have hidden from yourself. Your past, your fears, your deepest regrets. They will all come to the surface. The power Karma offers will strip you bare and expose everything. Are you prepared for that?" Jax's heart skipped a beat. He had never wanted to confront his past. Every mission, every deal he had ever taken had been a way to outrun the ghosts of who he had been. The things he had done, the people he had hurt, were all buried in the dark corners of his mind. He had chosen this life to escape the burden of his past, to avoid having to make a real choice. But now, here it was, the choice. He swallowed hard, taking a deep breath, trying to steady himself. His hand reached out toward the swerving light in the center of the room. His fingers brushed the air around it, and in that moment he felt a jolt, a rush of raw power, that shot up his arm, like electricity surging through his veins. His body tensed, the energy almost too much to handle. The light flared brighter, pulling him closer, and before he could react, it enveloped him, wrapping around his body like a cocoon. It wasn't painful, not exactly, but it was overwhelming. His vision blurred, and he felt himself being pulled through space, through time. 1,000 images flashed before his eyes, worlds being born, galaxies colliding, civilizations rising and falling, lives being created and extinguished in an instant. He gasped, his breath coming in ragged bursts, as the visions intensified. A flood of knowledge, of understanding, poured into him, flooding his mind with impossible concepts. He saw the architects, the beings who had created Karma, standing together in their alien city, staring up at the stars, their faces filled with a quiet desperation. He saw Karma being born, an entity crafted from the very essence of the universe itself. And then he saw the moment of its escape, the architects' failure to control it, their fear as they realized they had created something too powerful to contain. But then the visions turned darker. Jax saw the destruction that followed, the war between those who sought to control Karma and those who sought to destroy it. Entire star systems were reduced to rubble, entire species wiped out in the blink of an eye. He saw himself, his face, his hands, covered in blood, wielding the power of Karma as if it were nothing more than a weapon. The vision slowed, the light around him dimming. Jax was left standing in a void, alone, his heart racing, his body trembling. The knowledge he had gained, the power he had felt, were now a part of him, etched into his very soul. "You have seen the truth, Jax," Azeroth's voice echoed in the void, But now it was distant, like a whisper from the farthest reaches of his mind. You have seen what karma can do, but you must decide how to wield it. Jax shook his head, his thoughts swirling in chaos. I don't know if I can control it. I don't know if I'm strong enough. The voice was soft, almost sympathetic. Strength is not what matters. It is your heart, your resolve. Karma does not seek a conqueror, Jax. It seeks a guide. It will not give you power to dominate the universe. It will give you the power to help it evolve. But first, you must evolve yourself. Jax clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. The visions, the knowledge, the weight of karma's power, it was all too much. But there was no turning back now. Whatever path he chose, whatever decision he made, it would forever change the course of the galaxy. Suddenly, the void shattered, and Jax was back in the chamber, standing before Azeroth, the light now dimming around him. His body felt heavy, his mind clouded with uncertainty. But deep inside, he could feel it, karma's presence, like a pulse beneath his skin, waiting for him to take the next step. Azeroth looked at him with quiet understanding. You have felt its power, Jax. Now, you must decide. Will you accept the burden of the future, or will you walk away, leaving karma to others? Jax took a long, shaky breath. He wasn't ready. But was anyone ever ready for something like this? He raised his head, meeting Azeroth's gaze. The decision was clear now. He had no choice. I accept, Jax said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. I'll guide it. I'll control it. I'll make sure karma doesn't fall into the wrong hands. The chamber around them seemed to respond, the walls vibrating with energy, as if acknowledging his choice. The light flared one final time, bright enough to blind him. And then, everything went dark. The shattering. When Jax's vision returned, he found himself standing in a vast, desolate landscape. The ground beneath his boots was cracked and lifeless, a barren expanse stretching out in all directions. There was no sky, no stars, just an endless void. The air was cold, bitter, and still, as if the universe itself had abandoned this place. He blinked, confused. This wasn't the chamber where he had made his choice. This wasn't the room with Azeroth and the pulsing light of karma. It was something else, something far more unsettling. He took a hesitant step forward, the crunch of his boots against the cracked earth echoing in the silence. His body felt different, lighter somehow, more attuned, as if he were part of something much larger than himself. The power of karma coursed through him, a constant, steady hum at the back of his mind. It was as if he could feel the entire galaxy in his bones, its rhythm, its pulse. But that was not all he felt. There was a presence here, something ancient, something vast and dangerous. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath his feet. Jax's knees buckled as an enormous, swirling vortex of energy erupted in front of him. It wasn't like the light from karma. This was dark, twisted, a force of malevolence that seemed to reach out with invisible fingers. The energy pulsed and writhed like a living thing, its tendrils of darkness extending toward him. Jax tried to step back, but the pull was immediate, powerful. It was as if the very fabric of the universe was being torn apart, and he was the center of it. A voice, deep, booming, and filled with malice, echoed through his mind. It wasn't Azeroth. It wasn't karma. It was something far older. You think you can control it? The voice was like thunder, shaking the ground beneath him. Jax clenched his fists, his body trembling from the sheer force of the energy swirling around him. You are weak. You are nothing. Karma is mine to command, and I will see you fall. Jax's breath caught in his throat as the darkness swirled closer, wrapping around his body like chains. He could feel the weight of the malevolent presence pressing down on him, suffocating him. But in the back of his mind, Karma's voice, calm, steady, cut through the chaos. Focus, Jax. You have control. You are the guide, not the servant. Do not let it consume you. Jax's chest tightened. He tried to concentrate, to remember the power he had chosen. He wasn't just a mercenary anymore. He wasn't just a pawn in a cosmic game. He was meant to guide the galaxy, to evolve alongside it. But how could he control something so destructive, so infinite? The dark energy coiled tighter, and Jax's vision blurred. But then something inside him snapped. He could feel Karma's energy inside him, like a heartbeat, like a pulse. It was waiting for him to take the lead. It wasn't a weapon to be wielded. It was a force to be understood, to be shaped. With a fierce determination, Jax closed his eyes and reached out, not with his hands, but with his mind, his soul. He reached for the darkness, for the energy that sought to overwhelm him. And he did not fight it. He did not resist. Instead, he embraced it. The darkness recoiled, as if stunned by his boldness. The energy trembled, shifted, as if unsure of what to do. Jax could feel its anger, its hunger, but he could also feel its fear. Fear of being controlled, of being made to serve something greater. Karma. Jax let out a breath, steadying himself. He didn't need to dominate the darkness. He didn't need to control it with force. He needed to guide it. He needed to show it the way. The darkness quivered, then began to dissipate, as if responding to his will. The vortex slowed, its chaotic energy settling into something more manageable. It wasn't gone, not entirely, but it was no longer a threat. A voice, soft, almost a whisper, spoke from the void. "You are strong, Jax. Stronger than I thought." Jax didn't respond. He wasn't sure who or what was speaking, but it didn't matter. The most important thing was that he had survived this first test. He had faced the darkness, and he had bent it to his will. But that wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. The voice continued, its tone shifting, growing colder. Karma's power is not meant to be controlled. It is meant to be consumed, and you will consume it. The darkness began to swirl again, faster this time, more violent. Jax gritted his teeth. There was no time to waste. Karma had already chosen him, but if he wasn't careful, this malevolent presence would devour him, just as if it devoured so many others before. "You will fail," the voice boomed again. "You will fall, just like the others. You are nothing but a pawn in the hands of forces far beyond your comprehension." The world around Jax began to break apart, the ground cracking, the air warping. His chest tightened as the weight of the darkness grew, threatening to swallow him whole. But as it did, he felt the presence of Karma again, calm, unyielding, a guiding light in the storm. "Do not listen," Karma's voice echoed softly in his mind. "You are the guide, Jax, not the victim. Control the chaos. Control it with your will." He could feel it now, the pull of Karma's power, urging him to stay strong, to remain focused. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival anymore. He was fighting for the fate of the entire galaxy. The force that sought to consume Karma, to destroy it, was far too powerful for any one being to handle. But if he could control it, if he could guide it toward the light, he could reshape the galaxy. He could save it from its inevitable destruction. Jax closed his eyes and reached out again, this time with all his strength. He let Karma's energy flow through him, merging with the darkness and bending it to his will. It fought back, struggled against him, but he held firm. His thoughts sharpened, focused. He could see the path now, clearer than ever before. "This is your final test, Jax," Azroth's voice echoed from the depths of his mind. "Your choice will decide whether the galaxy rises or falls, whether you become the guide or the tyrant." The darkness began to recede, no longer threatening, no longer all-consuming. The vortex began to calm, its fury waning as Jax pushed forward, not with force but with understanding. And then, in the silence that followed, Jax realized something profound. The true power of Karma was not in its destruction, but in its evolution, and it was up to him to guide it, toward creation, toward balance, toward a future yet unknown. He wasn't the hero the galaxy needed. He wasn't a savior. He was something far more complex, a guide, a force of evolution in its purest form. And now the galaxy's fate rested in his hands, the catalyst of change. The silence in the void was oppressive, the weight of Karma's power pressing down on Jax like a physical force. He could feel the energy of the universe swirling around him, its potential coiled tight like a spring, ready to snap at any moment. But as he stood there, his mind clear and focused, he realized something had shifted. The chaos, the malevolent force that had tried to consume him, was no longer a threat. It had been transformed. In its place was something different, a strange, delicate balance. Karma had responded to him, not through force or fear, but through understanding. The darkness, the destructive energy that had once sought to tear the universe apart, was now tethered to him, held in check by his will. He opened his eyes and found himself standing once again in the familiar chamber, the one with the alien sky outside, the glow of the crystalline core at its center. Azeroth stood before him, its presence calm, almost expectant. "You've done it," Azeroth said, its voice soft, like a gentle breeze. "You've passed the final test." Jax barely noticed the alien's words. His mind was still reeling, still absorbing the depth of what had just transpired. The power he now possessed, the power of Karma, was beyond anything he had ever imagined. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't something to control, like a fleet of ships or an army of soldiers. It was something more, a living force, a catalyst for change that could shape the very course of evolution itself. For a moment, he thought about the vision he had seen earlier, the galaxy burning, the ships of war tearing through the fabric of space, and himself standing at the center, wielding Karma's power as if it were a weapon. But now, with the light of clarity shining in his mind, he understood. That vision was not a prophecy, it was a warning, a vision of what could happen if he succumbed to the chaos. But that wasn't the path he would take. He would not become a tyrant. He would not become a destroyer. Karma's power was not meant to bring about death and domination. It was meant to bring about evolution. A new way of living, a new order, where the galaxy could rise from the ashes of its past. Jax stepped forward, his boots silent on the stone floor, and looked Azeroth directly in the eyes. "I'm not going to use Karma to control the galaxy. I'm going to guide it." Azeroth's gaze softened, a sense of approval radiating from the alien. "Yes, that is the way. You understand now." Jax felt the power within him shift, and suddenly he saw the galaxy. Not as a vast expanse of stars and planets, not as a collection of worlds bound by gravity, but as a living, breathing organism, constantly evolving, constantly shifting, like a great tide that swept through time and space. He could feel the pulse of the galaxy, the ebb and flow of its energy. He could feel its hopes and fears, its desires and its pain. But more than that, he could feel the future he was about to create. The visions of destruction, of war, of the galaxy tearing itself apart faded. They were replaced by something more profound. He saw species, millions of them, from the most advanced to the simplest forms of life, coming together, working in harmony. There were no more factions, no more divisions between planets and species. Instead, there was understanding, cooperation. The galaxy was moving forward, towards something greater than anything it had ever known. He closed his eyes, allowing the vision to envelop him. His body tingled with the energy of Karma, but it wasn't overwhelming now. It was calm. It was centered. "We can do this," Jax whispered, almost to himself. "We can guide them. Together." Azeroth's presence was there beside him, watching silently. "You are not alone in this, Jax. There are others, beings like you, chosen by Karma, who will help guide this evolution. But you are the catalyst. You are the one who must lead." Jax nodded slowly. He had always been a fighter, a survivor, a lone wolf. But now he saw the bigger picture. He had the power to change everything. He wasn't fighting for credits anymore. He wasn't fighting for a cause or a contract. He was fighting for the future of the galaxy, a galaxy that, if given the chance, could rise to something greater than it had ever been. But even as he stood there, filled with purpose, Jax knew there would be those who would resist. There would be those who saw karma's power as a threat, as a means to dominate. The path to evolution would not be easy. There would be battles, political, military, ideological, that would have to be fought. There would be sacrifices. And yet, he was ready, more than ready. He had already seen the cost of power. He had seen what it did to those who tried to control it for their own ends. He would not make that mistake. He would guide karma, not as a conqueror, but as a steward. Azeroth, Jax said, his voice firm, his resolve unshakable. I'm ready. Let's start this. Azeroth's gaze deepened, as if measuring the weight of his words. After a long moment, the alien nodded. Then it begins. The evolution of the galaxy has already started, but it will take time. Patience. Understanding. Jax took a deep breath and looked out toward the horizon, toward the stars that now felt like they were within his reach. The future stretched out before him, a vast canvas, waiting to be shaped. He could feel the pulse of karma, guiding him, urging him forward. For the first time in his life, Jax wasn't running. He wasn't escaping his past or the darkness within him. He was embracing it, embracing the future. And as he stepped forward toward the unknown, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: the galaxy was changing, and he was the one who would guide it to a better tomorrow. As Jax disappeared into the horizon, the last flicker of light from the crystalline core dimmed. The chamber grew silent once more, the stars above glowing brighter, their paths changing ever so slightly. The fate of the galaxy had shifted. The power of karma would be wielded, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a beacon of hope. And with that hope, a new era began. The evolution had begun.